Good morning, everyone. I'll go ahead and call this briefing meeting for the Board of Water Resources to order. It is, what day is it? It is Tuesday. I was thinking it was Thursday. It's Tuesday, December 5th, 2023, and we're holding this briefing meeting in our regular location at the Department of Natural Resources. And so I'll go ahead and just kick things off. My name is Juliette Tennert. I chair the Board of Water Resources this year, and I represent Salt Lake and Tooele counties. And we'll go ahead and have our board members introduce themselves.
Good morning, I'm Charles Holmgren. I represent the Bear River Basin.
Good morning, Kyle Stevens, and I represent the Weber River area.
Spencer Jones, I represent the Upper Colorado River Basin.
Blaine Ipson, I represent the Sevier River area.
Dana Van Horn, I represent the Upper Colorado River, and Spencer represents the lower.
Sorry.
Mike Davis, the Provo River Drainage.
Randy Crozier, Green River.
All right, excellent. And I'm excited to note that Brian Steed is our newest board member representing the Great Salt Lake. We're working on what his attendance will be today. It sounds like he's in Washington, D.C. We hope that he will join us for the full board meeting, but we'll figure that out. But nevertheless, I'm just excited that we're a complete board again, which is so we'll enter 2024 as a complete board. I don't have a lot to report for Chair's report, just that it's always a pleasure to spend time with everyone. I'm glad we're together. Excited to enjoy the holiday season, and we've got some good work to get taken care of today. I'll go ahead and turn time over to Director Hassenjaeger to introduce the staff that is present at this briefing meeting, and then I understand that we have some new employees to meet.
Yes. Ooh, I might have to share that.
Yeah. Oh, yes, look at that. There you go.
Thank you. Good morning. With us today, we have Joel Williams, Shalane DiBernardi, Todd Stoneley, Marisa Egbert, Tom Cox, Eric Dixon, Carl Egge, Marty Bushman, and Liz Harris. Shannon Clow doing the minutes. Thank you, Shannon. And our amazing AV team in the back, Carmen McDonald and Seth Majors. And then, as you mentioned, we have three new employees, Patrick Campana, Brad Caldwell, and Ethan Sawyer. And we're going to have them introduced. So let's start with Patrick. Eric, do you want to come introduce Patrick? Yep, come on up to wherever is convenient, and then you can... Perfect, thank you.
Okay, I'll just do a very brief introduction. This is Patrick. He's in the design and construction section. We hired him 3 months ago.
Yeah, beginning of October.
Early October, so we're excited to have him. He's doing an awesome job. We got him on some projects already, but I'll let him tell a little bit about himself, and then you guys can ask him any questions you want.
Yeah, it's really nice to meet all of you. I guess I'm a Salt Lake native, but lived in Salt Lake Valley my whole life. I'm really excited to be a part of the Division of Water Resources and get to contribute to the betterment of my community. And I look forward with working with the people of Utah and hopefully having a meaningful impact on the work that all of you do here. So, yeah, it's great to meet you.
Are there any questions? Well, welcome. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Great. Marisa, do you want to come bring up your duo?
You guys come together, so they're stuck together. There you go.
So when Eric said 3 months, I was like, wait a minute. And then Patrick said October. Both Ethan and Brad were hired in October as well, near the end of October. So Ethan is our other FTE, full-time employee that we received the funding for through the secondary metering funding. And then Ethan is replacing me because I got promoted and it left a vacancy there, a very small hole. And Ethan's already taken over really great. So I'm going to let them talk more.
Hello, good to meet you. I'm Brad, and I just graduated from University of Utah, so I'm pretty fresh and new. And I'm a Salt Lake native, just like Patrick, and I'm excited to work with you guys.
Yeah, I'm Ethan. I'm also a Salt Lake native, but I graduated from the University of Utah and then spent 5 years in private practice as a civil engineer. And now I'm here, very excited to be working with water resources and working with the board. So.
Great. Any questions?
Just a comment. I met two of these guys on a Bear River Canal Company tour, and they'd been on board for about a week or something, they said.
Is that your first day,
And
Ethan?
First week, yeah.
First week.
yeah, and so field trips were good, you know.
And they are going to take all their amazing wealth of experience and present today. They each have a project already.
I likewise had an opportunity to meet both of them. Again, I think it was the first week, because it was the end of October, when we'd had a project review with Davis-Weber County Canal Company. So, welcome aboard.
Thank you.
Thank you.
That could be every month with Davis Weber.
Yeah, I was just going to say, Kyle, in your area, there's a high probability that you would have run into these guys. Well, welcome to all three of you. Thank you so much for your service, important roles that all of you fill, and we're excited to work with you. All right. Anything else, Director?
Not right off, so we can.
All right, well, let's jump into just making sure we have full information on the board agenda for the day. So first item is the approval of minutes. Is there anything that we need to discuss on that?
Madam Chair, I found one small typo, and I've already handed those over to Shannon, and it was just a word description. I'm sure spell check was helping her when it didn't need to.
I know that well. Okay, thank you, Charles. Will you make the motion on that then, and
Yes.
we'll have that sorted out by the meeting. Okay, any other comments, discussion around the minutes? Right, so then we need to jump into feasibility reports. Looks like the first one on our list is RE 472, Kyle's area, Davis and Weber County Canal Company. Tom is the manager on those. Actually, why don't we just take 472 and 474 together for discussion purposes now. Kyle, did you want to set these up?
Well, again, this is the one that I mentioned that had opportunity to meet Brad and Ethan and Tom when we met with Davis and Weber County Canal Companies on this particular project. This is, and Tom will probably go into it, but this is the location of this project is not too far from where the breach of the Davis Canal happened in the late 90s?
It was 1999.
Okay. So with that, let you go ahead and introduce the project.
So in the interest of time, I probably won't go into a lot of details. So if you have any questions, feel free to jump in. Just a warning, my voice is going, so maybe it'll be through by the end of this meeting and someone else can present in the real meetings. But Davis Weber has been to the board many times for projects to improve their canal and also put in and enlarge their secondary irrigation system. So today they're coming before the board with two projects. The first one is to make improvements to an old abandoned penstock that they use to flush their system in the spring, before they just flush all the stuff out of the canal before it gets into the smaller distribution part of the system. And they also can use that point for an emergency discharge in case something happens like the breach in 1999. The canal is 17 plus miles long, so even if you shut the water off at the headwaters, there's still a lot of water that can come down the canal. So if they have emergency discharge points, it can reduce the damages done if there's a problem. So that's the first project. It's coming from the revolving fund because The amount they're asking for is less than $1 million, and that money is available. So that's why there's the 0% interest. Because they're getting such good interest rate, we're having the payback period 20 years. Normally, they really don't get any monetary benefit out of the project. So we normally would have extended payoff, but because they're getting such a good deal, I decided to cut the payment period a little bit shorter. The other one is just their next step in closing their canal and replacing some old aluminized steel pipe that's deteriorating. So that will be at 2.1% interest, which is kind of a weighted average of their culinary versus ag water. So our ag target interest rate is 1%. The culinary one right now is, I think, 3.8%. So the weighted average comes up with 2.1% interest, and we are giving them 30 years to pay that one back. And the reason they're two separate projects is mainly that the companies requested that they be split to help in their bookkeeping. The canal enclosure one comes with a Water Smart grant, so it just helps keep things clear in their books as far as where money comes and goes. So that's why there's two different projects with the board. So any questions on that one, or those two?
Tom, correct me if I'm wrong, but this also is in an area where there's a lot of work taking place relative to the realignment of I-15. If you've driven up that way along where it intersects and the access for Riverdale Road and such. So this is a part that it's in conjunction with all of that construction that's going on there.
Right.
A question, Madam Chair and Tom. I read in the report, and I can't remember if it's the first one or the second one. I think it's the first one. Part of the funding's going toward land purchase.
Yes, their emergency discharge, it's an old penstock from I guess Pacificor now, but an old generating plant. So they have the penstock from the mesa, the hill where Hill Air Force Base is, drops off the hill. So that's piped. That steel pipe is deteriorating. Then it discharges into a concrete lined channel, and then it discharges into an unlined channel. And since Pacificor has abandoned that hydro plant, that unlined channel really hasn't been maintained. So Davis Weber wants to purchase that property so they have control over that and control over the maintenance. So that's part of the property, or part of the project is property purchase, and they're still in negotiations with Pacificor on that point. So.
Okay, I've been around here long enough, I should know better, but I just wondered if that was acceptable under policy to purchase land where you can't do it if you're purchasing water rights, but you can for land.
We've done land purchases many times, but maybe I've been around long enough that I've seen everything too. But I don't know.
Thank you, Tom.
I still remember my first project was with Charles in Bear River City.
All right. Exactly.
Let's see, 1992.
Any other questions? Tom, I just have one. That it feels like the 20 years with 0%, like feels right to me. But have you gotten any indication that the applicants would be looking for something different than that 20 years?
No, we've done the minimum number of years payment. That's even 15 years. So this is 5 years longer than that.
All right.
And I looked at even spreading that to 25 years, and that would drop the payment from $50,000 to $40,000. And even looked at the 2.1% interest that we're giving for the other project, and that would put it around $47,000. So they're all in that neighborhood. So.
Thank you. Right. Well, sounds good on that one. I think that just to keep things very clean in the agenda during the board meeting, we'll treat these separately, but thank you for presenting them together because I know they're.
Oh, and Rick Smith, the manager, will be here in person. So.
Thank you. Okay, next we have a feasibility report on RM 074 Lehigh City. Looks like, Tom, you've got that one as well. And Mike, I think this is your area. Did you want to set this up?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Yeah, this is a secondary meter project with a loan, $2.2 million loan at 1%, 15 year. So Tom, in a grant on top of that. So if you can explain that, please.
Great, thank you.
And if you don't mind, Madam Chair, members of the board, I'll kind of lump Lehigh and Bountiful
Yeah,
together because it's sort of the same thing. And
okay, great.
back in October, the board authorized and committed the round 2 of grant funds for the secondary meter project. And so both Lehigh and Bountiful are the applicants coming back to ask the board for a loan to help cover the remaining part. So it is 25.5% of the project costs, 1% interest, 15 years, like all the other secondary meter projects.
Great, any questions on those? Okay. Kyle, I assume you're supportive of the one in your area? Okay, all right. We'll plan on the appropriate motions for those. Seems pretty straightforward.
Just to mention, Lehigh will have their finance director here in person, but someone else from the city will be here virtually. Bountiful will be virtually.
Okay, excellent, all right.
Their president, Kurt Goff.
All right, thank you, Tom. Let's see, next we have, this one is mine. It's the Metro Water District of Salt Lake and Sandy. And I might just have Bradley go through this. I feel like maybe now I'm remembering, perhaps, were you thrown into this one on your very first day? Am I remembering that right?
That is correct. I got thrown to the wolves.
That's right. So this one's this one's a little bit unique, a little bit different than what we normally do. If I'm understanding right, we're proposing an interest rate buy down for this project, and Bradley can take us through that.
Sure. So Metropolitan wants to upgrade / install some aging and seismically unstable pipelines in the Cottonwood Heights area between Little Cottonwood and Big Cottonwood. And so, sorry.
That's great.
They want to so Zions Bank recommended that we do an interest rate buy down with them and to offer a net effective interest rate of 3%. And yeah. Sorry, any questions or anything?
Yeah, I mean, because I think this is just, again, I say it's unique, but it's allowable within our rule and within the statute. I want to make sure that I understand it correctly. It is an interest rate buy down, so the like Metro would be going to the private market to borrow funds, and then we would be coming in to help them target that more affordable interest rate for a portion of the project to make the project pencil out. But we still, if I understand right, it's not like we're just putting cash out. We'll actually still see that money coming back into our funds. So that's where it's a large amount of money. I want you to see, the amounts here. It's a large amount. I'm supportive of it, and I kind of like the way this is structured, given that large amount. We still allow the private market to kick in. We're just helping to facilitate this so we could get the project done. So I'm supportive of it, but again, it's a little bit different than how we normally handle these. And Marisa perhaps can provide some insight.
Yeah, we haven't done
We like went the
these-
rounds with trying to figure this thing out.
We haven't done these for a while. For when they can get a kind of an equivalent rate on the market, they will get an interest rate on the market or a bond on the market if they can. Right now, we're in a situation where the interest rates are so high, so the option would be come to us for the full 50 million or 85% of the 50 million. Or do this interest rate buy down. So this also helps extend the availability of the board's funds rather than coming up with the chunk of it. And, you know, the numbers that we've got in the report are even kind of possibly a little old. You know, we got them probably a month ago. So we've come up with some, working with their finance through Zion's, Jonathan Ward. He helped come up with the numbers where we're trying to get it down to what we would fund it at 3%, typically about 3%, wherever the bond rate is at the time. And so that's the idea on this.
How do the water rights work on this one? Because we're like,
Well, we're
again,
doing a bond.
yeah. Okay. So we're
Yeah,
that we
so
still
we're not taking any title to any of the water rights. That's why we bond.
Okay.
Because they cannot divest themselves of those. So they'll have the market bond and then our bond. And the market bond, would it necessarily go in the escrow? Should. Okay. Yeah, so should all be in the escrow. Their money, our money, and the what they get through the market. And in this case, we just put, you know, applicant / market bond because it hasn't been broken down into. But we also figure they are kind of coming in with a bunch of money in a way. You know, they'll have to pay interest on it. So we will see all the funding go through our escrow. And when Bradley has to start reimbursing a few million at a time, he will see all the invoices coming through for that. And so we'll see all that information.
Madam Chair. I just, so what is the anticipated interest rate without the buy down?
Meaning from us?
No, what the
Just if
interest
they went to the-
rate
if
on
they
the
went to the
bond would
market.
be without the buy down?
At the time, they were saying 4.88. That's what we've got. That's what he came up with about 6 weeks ago.
So you're looking at an interest buy down of just a little less than 2%.
Yeah, so the board would fund it at 0%. And
Right,
then,
but the buy down is a 2% basically that we're buying the note down.
we're hoping to bring it down to around 3.
Right.
Yeah, and if I could just chime in, the other thing, that 4.88% that they can get on the market typically won't provide a 30-year repayment period either. So they're only getting 20 on the market. And so 20 years at 4.88%, the board would typically offer for a project this large a longer repayment term. So that's also considered as part of the net effective rate. Their total repayment brings it down to about 3. So ours at 1%, theirs at almost 5. So.
I appreciate that. That helps me to understand just what we're buying down. Thank you.
Madam Chair, I had a question.
Go ahead.
So as far as collateralization, I know we talked a little bit about that here a minute ago, but here it just says that the applicant obtains water through a purchase agreement with Weber Basin District. And so how does that work? Do we carefully scrutinize that purchase agreement as far as to ensure the longevity of the delivery of that water? Like, I guess just for future projects, how does that work where they don't necessarily own water right to collateralize to guarantee that?
I don't know why she went to sit down.
These are good
I'm not really
questions.
sure. She didn't ask.
I'm just curious how that works.
Understanding how this works.
Yes, we will probably review the purchase agreement, but also in this case, like Marisa said, we do bond, so we aren't taking title, the board isn't taking title to anything. Even if they did own water rights, we wouldn't. What we require for a bond is a lengthy attorney's opinion stating everything is in place and in order for this project to be able to function as long as it takes for them to make the payments back.
Okay.
So
So
Yeah.
we're hoping, and this is just, I guess, education for me, because I'm somewhat new here, is, and so in that attorney opinion of just hoping that they've reviewed the purchase agreement to ensure, the water purchase agreement to ensure that their ability to have water, which is
Right.
a method of repayment on the bond, is satisfactory.
Yes, and if that's the sole source of water for this project, we will get a draft attorney's opinion long before the bond closes and make sure that we are satisfied with what's written in that opinion. And if we're not, then we require something more. So, yeah, if we feel like we need to see the purchase agreement, we'll ask.
I feel like, and again, I'm kind of stating things, I'm just validating with you. It feels as though on a deal like this, we also have a little bit of, I don't know, extra security or extra information in that for this project, they're borrowing from the privates,
Yes.
from the markets. And so in the due diligence process for that, for those bonds, the rating agencies will take all of this into account too when they're
Yes.
helping and the market's pricing this. And so
Right.
in this particular project, we should have some additional information there. But again, because we don't do
Yeah.
these often, I'm just interested in how this works as well. So thank you.
You're
for
right.
that.
I mean, we try to be really careful to make sure we're entering into rock solid agreements. But yes, anytime the private sector is involved, there's an extra factor checking.
Yeah.
So,
Again, and I asked this to begin with, we're just going to restate or rephrase what I'm making sure to validate. This is not maybe a pure interest rate buy down. It's essentially we're loaning the funds to them to buy down the interest rate.
right.
essentially.
Yeah, there are times the board has provided grant funds for credit enhancement so that they can get this, they can go out and they can personally buy their interest rate down. But this is an interest rate buy down will provide lower interest funds, they'll get higher interest funds combined, they end up with a net effective rate around 3%. So, yes, you're correct. It's not a credit enhancement grant. This is a loan that will be repaid
Okay. Thank you.
with interest.
Excellent. Excellent.
Little
Thank you for
interest.
I know you did that at the beginning, but just to validate what's going on here. Yes, please go ahead.
Another question. So it looks like the bonded indebtedness that we're looking at is approximately $22 million is what it says.
Right?
Where's our funding at on the C&D fund for a $22 million project?
We'll discuss that during status of funds. It does take up a big chunk. There's another project, the next one, that's another good-sized one too, that does have an impact on our status of funds. But I will definitely go into that more in depth when we discuss that, because we also have word out there of additional large projects wanting to submit applications, so we'll talk about them.
Shalene, I hate to put you on the spot, but if it's appropriate, could you talk about that now a little bit more deeply?
Sure.
Because it might influence how
Okay.
we're thinking about.
Sure.
Yeah, this particular project.
Sure,
I feel comfortable. I've looked at it
Yeah.
pretty well, but still I think it's helpful to.
Right, and I will say, while it does, if you look at the status of funds report, it does look like your amounts are dwindling. And I will say, while it looks like that on paper, our accounts are still really flush for a couple of reasons. I mean, one, when I put at the top of the status of funds, the funding that's available for the current fiscal year, it's what we anticipate. But it includes interest on the funds that are already there. It includes repayments that come throughout the year, plus especially with the C&D fund, it includes the repayments that come whenever, or the C&D fund includes sales tax, that we receive a deposit every single month. So, and those amounts are significant. The sales tax and the repayments amount, I believe, are somewhere in the $50 to $60 million range. So that comes in over the course of the year. And you add to that the fact that while the amount shown available for the year doesn't count anything that's already been contracted, even though it's not spent. So when you think of a project like Provo River's Deer Creek project, where the board's providing $65 million, they didn't provide that all up front at once. And they won't even provide it all this year. It's a multi-year project, but we act like that 65 million isn't really available, but a lot of that is still actually sitting in the account. So we have, I think the nature of these funds, while it does look like we're using up what's available, we have projects out there that are authorized. We even have some that are committed that may realize it's not something they can do right now, not something they want to do right now. So until they're actually contracted, we still kind of have the availability to use those. But even with this large $22 million project, we're still above zero with everything that's currently authorized and committed. So,
And that above zero is without the projected like deposits from the sales tax year.
no, and I do include that as
Okay.
what's available through the year.
Okay.
But I don't have my status of funds with
So,
me.
yeah, I know that's what to put you on the spot. I mean, we can go into this in more detail, but just because it influences our thinking, I
Right, the
appreciate
thinking
this.
about this project, yeah, I mean, that is part of the game of playing with the accounts. I mean, it's not a game, but you know, in figuring out what we can finance and when and how things work, you know, I show you on paper what's available because we consider that all these other projects that have been contracted, that money is theirs whenever they need it. So I don't put that as available. But we could actually pay for some of those funds with future funds that are expected to come in, you know, the repayments or the sales tax that are coming. But really, if I were to tell you the actual account balance, I mean, we just got that the other day, what the balance was at the end of November, and the actual C&D balance is much more than what it looks like on paper.
And I have that number.
Do ya?
handy. Yeah, Madam Chair, thank you. Just wanted to add some additional information. So, our current account balance as of the end of November was 98 mil, or pretty much 99 million write-off. And then just for, and it might be helpful maybe at a future board meeting that we can kind of dive into the sales tax a little bit more so you guys can understand where all of that money is coming from, especially for the folks who are new on the board. But last year in FY 2023, over the course of the year, the sales tax that came into the C&D fund was approximately $43 million. And as to date, we're about $14.5 million. And that's really comparable to what we saw at the beginning of the fiscal year in FY 2023. So, I mean, you never know what sales tax will do, but we've seen increasing growth within the board's deposits from sales tax into C&D, and happy to share more detailed numbers with you guys as well.
I appreciate that explanation. That was a question that I was going to raise as I reviewed the status of funds report. I was just curious as to, you know, what is the annual revenue that comes in? One, via principal interest on repayment of loans, and then what comes in as new revenue from
Right.
sales tax and other things.
And I will add this, and I do actually have that spreadsheet. I can, you know, I give you after I've done all my calculations, but there is this whole entry spreadsheet where I have to, and it's a lot of guesses. I mean, we know the repayment amounts that are due in any fiscal year, but the sales tax is an estimate. We look at the last few years, and so I did. This year, I estimated that we'll get about 43 million again, because we had a little bit more than that last year. But we already, for the months from July 1st through November, every number's been a little bit higher than last year. So we probably will have, so when I say what's available, when I put that number at the top of the status of funds spreadsheet, that includes the balance that was carried over from last year that wasn't contracted for, the repayments that are expected over the course of the year, and the estimated sales tax that's coming in. And I will say, when Candace said the actual balance is about 99 million, just keep in mind December 1st is the repayment date for a whole bunch of projects out of the C&D fund. So we'll expect a big influx of cash this month as well. So,
Madam Chair, I have a question.
Yes, please.
So I'm trying to understand this too, since I'm new at this. The market bond is a 20-year bond, so they're making annual payments of 2.2 something million. Our payment on the 30-year is about 885,000. Is there a reason we keep that additional 10 years? I'm trying to understand why we would go the additional 10 years, or would we want accelerated payments? I mean, they're essentially doing a rate increase likely to pay for this. And
Well-
that doesn't go away.
and I don't know if they are doing a rate increase. I don't remember discussing that. But I will say this. This is a project that doesn't really have a lot of financial benefit, if I'm not mistaken. Normally, we might calculate repayments based on the financial benefit they'll get from the project. This is one of those things that can provide resiliency and redundancy, but doesn't necessarily improve what they can provide. So we can't take that into account when calculating the repayments. The board would typically offer a 15 to 25-year repayment. We have been doing a lot more 30-year payments lately. I think our thinking on this one was that if we were providing the full amount, we would probably offer 25 years where they have to pay 20 on the market. We're willing to go 30 to give them a little breathing room. This is just one project of many they're going to be doing. They are hoping to get some aqueduct resilience funds in the future for some of their other sections of aqueduct that are higher at risk. Those funds come directly from the legislature, so the board wouldn't necessarily be involved in those, but they haven't received any of those yet. And the other comment I would make, and just a reminder to the board, is the board is not a bank. Sometimes it feels like you are, and sometimes we operate as one, but the intention of the board is to help the citizens of the state and to work within the guidelines, but also to not be, how can we profit best from this? It's, are we doing the right thing? And that's not saying giving 30 years is or isn't the right thing. I'm just a reminder that the board isn't a bank and doesn't usually operate as one.
No, I didn't look at it that way. I looked at it that increases the availability of funds to help other
Right.
people in the state.
Right.
And that's how I would look at it. And where it goes through I understand exactly what you said, but after the 20-year period, if you looked at that versus the 25-year offer that we would make, that's a significant reduction to go that additional 10 years at the 1%.
Right.
And that's the part I'm wondering is, and that's probably outside of what we do, but that additional 10 years, it would seem like an accelerated payment at that point would be appropriate.
Right, and
But
that
maybe it's not even allowed by our.
Well, and I'm not going to say it isn't allowed, because that is something we could consider if you wanted to consider that lower repayment for 20 years and then make the last 5 years amortize the balance that remains after 20 years, make the last 5 payments, make it 5 payments to make the balance so that the board's 25-year guideline is still met rather than a 30-year repayment term. That is something I could play with between meetings and calculate if you're interested in seeing what that would do.
You could also make the adjustment for committal.
Yeah, I
Yeah,
don't know
we
that
could
I'm
do it
interested.
before committal of funds,
I'm
but
just trying to understand it. I don't know if I'm
Well,
pushing that issue, but
I mean, I guess maybe we should kind of get a little feedback from the board on this. The 30 years feels okay given what you've gone through. However, I am kind of thinking, I mean, I don't know how comfortable I am with setting a precedent of really inching towards that 30 years. If we think about the funding for this, significant portion is sales tax, like to get all wonky on the economy with you, the pace of growth in the sales tax is kind of changing because consumers are spending more on non-taxable services, healthcare, right? And so like that, when we get 30 years out in the future, what does repayments to this fund look like, and what is their availability of funds then to be doing projects? And of course, who even knows what the future, 30 years out, things can be completely different. And so I don't know that we should be very precise in our decision making now based on those sorts of trends. However, it is where I'm thinking about that inching towards 30 years, whether or not that's a place we really want to be. This is in my area, and so I'm okay with that 30 years. However, I think it's completely reasonable to get some information on the 25 years if we're feeling from others that might be a more comfortable place to be. Sounds like there's strong feelings.
We could look at that, and
Yeah, we
because
could do committal.
that's actually not uncommon for us,
Yeah.
Mike. I know you haven't been around a lot, but we do, even on bonds, do varied payments where we'll give them lower payments for a while to pay off another existing debt, and then say, okay, well, now you have more money available to pay us back. And so then we'll charge a higher repayment at that point because they can.
Right, and I understand the 20-year, it's an affordability issue for them.
Sure.
and This
Yeah.
helps them to make that, but once that's done, that's freeing up
Sure.
$0.2 million per year
Yeah.
on their end.
Yeah.
I'm wondering if that is more appropriate for us than to look at that, to reinvest that money in other projects. I don't know.
Yeah.
Since
I
I am new, I don't know, and maybe we have enough coming in.
Well, I'm
but I've
seeing
lived
nods from board
I
members. You
like
want me to
your-
play with those numbers, the spreadsheet, and see what I can come up with before? Okay.
Thanks, Juliette. We'd appreciate
No
that.
problem.
Madam Chair,
Yes, please.
I would certainly be in favor of looking at the 25 years with a stepped-up payment at the end of the, because where guidelines lay a little more with the 25 years rather than the 30.
They do.
I'd like to see us stay a little more consistent because it is a large block. And
Okay.
Anyway, let's take a look at the numbers.
Yeah.
Will do.
Appreciate that. Spencer, did you have a question or comment?
Yeah, I was just curious, didn't want to spend a lot of time on this, but was wondering, as far as there's no prepayment penalty on
No.
any of the things that we provide?
No, there's not. In
Okay.
fact, it's standard practice when the board enters into a bond and the money goes into the escrow account. It's standard practice to say that, to have that agreement for that escrow account state that if there's money in there at the end, even if it's theirs, it's going to go towards prepayment on the bond. So if someone comes in under budget and they end up with a couple $1 million sitting in that escrow account, it'll go to pay off the last payment or the last two payments so it shortens their repayment period anyway.
Okay. So when we calculate funds, because obviously, 30 years from now, I will be, for the record, 75 years old.
Yeah, I'm not going to be here either.
But anyways, with that, do we kind of have a running average of the percent of these projects that are paying early? I guess that would be nice. I don't need to say anything, but
Yeah, I don't know that we do. I don't think there's a whole lot that get paid off early. I will say there are some large projects that when they reach a point that they need to do another large project, like we had one recently, I'm going to say probably about 2 years ago, who decided they needed to do another project. They weren't coming to the board for funding. They went on the open market and they said, look, we're going to make this a bigger bond than we might normally and pay you off so we don't owe you any more money.
That's right, yeah.
So we do have that happen occasionally, but it's not a super regular occurrence, I don't think.
That's right.
okay, I just thought maybe that might reflect maybe, our future funds available or something, but it sounds like it doesn't happen.
It's
that often.
really a year-by-year game, figuring out what's not been contracted, what the repayments are now, what we estimate the sales tax to be. It's pretty much a year-by-year thing.
Yeah, okay, thank you.
Madam Chair?
Yes, please.
Just an observation from my point, and I represent a rural type area with you know, a lot of lower income, things
Right.
like that. The 30-year, I agree with Randy's take on things. The 30-year, in my mind, has historically been on ability to pay and on the
Sure.
smaller entities and things like that. And we're dealing right here with a large metro area type thing. And to me, there's a differentiation between 30 years for a small community in rural areas or a small irrigation company as opposed to 30 years for a great big metro district. So I'm with Randy as far as I don't feel comfortable going 30 years on a metro great big type thing. Our 30 years has been for the little guys, not the big guys.
Perfect. I appreciate that input, and I will get to work.
Great, thank you very much. Given that this is my area, I'd hope that someone would be willing to make a motion on this one.
I would do that.
Okay, thank you, Spencer. And it sounds like we'll get the information on the shorter repayment period. And I mean, I'm supportive of either, but I mean, I would suggest that we probably start from a place of that lower repayment period, but I'll leave that to you, Spencer. Okay, thanks for the conversation on
Chair?
that one. Yes, please go ahead.
If I may, sorry. Just a little perspective on the project. This is part of their aqueduct that goes from Deer Creek all the way into Salt Lake. This is just one portion. They are planning on having to, and they're doing this work because, as the report states in this section, there is what they're calling active failure going on. So there are 2 more phases they are looking on this large aqueduct to needing to replace for seismic issues. They did apply to the, what is it called, the aqueduct resiliency?
The Aqueduct Resiliency Funds.
They did apply to that for money for study. I think it's $1.5 million, with the idea that that study is looking at the other 2 phases of what they're gonna need to do.
Is that federal or state? A federal state?
No, it's,
It's a state appropriation from last year, and we had a application period, and then we can probably give a more description on it later, but yep, we can do that. But yeah, so they did get some money for study there.
yeah, some of the larger ones did apply. I think Weber Basin, several million. And so Metro applied for just $1.5 million to study for the next couple of phases.
Great,
So
thank you.
they still have that they need to deal with.
Thank you. I think, we took some time to discuss this. I'm watching time to make sure that we get to our board meeting on time, but again, this one was a little bit unique, and so I appreciate all of the questions and all of the information. And Bradley, thank you so much for helping us. Like I said, I'm pretty sure it was like we had a meeting on this at 2 p.m. on your first day, and so just know that this one is pretty complex, and we appreciate
I did my best.
you just keeping up with us and learning as you go, and all of your work on this one.
Madam Chair,
Please go ahead.
maybe one question to help clarify. This is probably a federal aqueduct, but they don't have the funds to redo it. Is that correct? I don't think so. So Deer Creek was never a federal project?
Well, this isn't Deer Creek, it's the aqueduct that they've got that goes all the way to Deer Creek.
Right, but the aqueduct that brings it into the Salt Lake Valley was never a federal project?
No.
Okay. I didn't
Yeah.
know what to, I think that was one of the questions that was being raised, so thanks for the clarification.
As you all check in with the applicants, I mean, just maybe double checking on that question would be helpful. And then I think or one of us, I am interested in the stream of revenue for the repayments, just understanding if they are planning on a rate increase or not. I know that was a question that came up, and so we'll likely ask that during the meeting if you just want to give them a heads up on that. Okay. All right, thank you. All right, next project is RL 591, Hurricane City. That is in your area, Spencer, and looks like Ethan is taking this one on. Spencer, do you want to set this up for us at all?
Yeah, so Hurricane City, they've been having significant growth down there in Washington County. A lot of this water has been from just open irrigation. They're proposing 17 miles of pipeline, 2 wells, and a 2 million gallon tank for this project. This will allow for them to take more of the municipal drinking domestic water and be able to spread that further and to be able to use this more efficiently for the secondary. So
All right,
I
thank
think
you.
from there, go ahead and let Ethan talk about it.
Yeah, so, yeah, the wells and the tank are for the culinary system, and like you said, more source and storage capacity there, and then the irrigation pressurized system. So just if you look at the map, in the kind of northeast section of the municipal boundary is kind of the more populated area, and that is split by Gold's Wash. And so they have a pressurized irrigation system north of that wash, and they're expanding that south of the wash. And that'll add about 700 connections to the pressurized irrigation system, and reduce having to rely on the old flood irrigation system. So, yeah, just a little bit more there. But this would be coming from this would be a $31 million and 300,000 project. With the board would be 40.5%, which would be 12,665,000. And that would be returned at 0% over 25 years, which would be a $528,000 annual payment. They have an NRCS grant, which goes towards the pressurized irrigation system, and so I think there's a little bit of maybe different than normal in how that cost sharing goes with the NRCS grant. So if there's any questions on that, but yeah, any other questions besides?
Thank you. Yeah, please go ahead.
So do they have the NRCS grant in hand at the present time?
Yes.
Yeah. Other questions?
Madam Chair, members of the board, maybe just an explanation on how we came up with the loan terms, the 0% interest. The board has the affordability guideline of 1.4% of the area's MAGI, median adjusted gross income. So that's our target cost per water per connection, with what the residents pay for culinary water, and some of them pay for the secondary water, plus the property tax they pay to the Washington County Water Conservancy District. You add that up and put in what our suggested annual payment would be. It would trickle down to the individual landowner. Then that all adds up and exceeds the board's affordability guidelines. So in those cases, we typically reduce the interest rate and maybe lengthen the repayment years. So that's why, and 0%, this is coming from the city's water loan fund, not the C&D funds. We're not required to charge interest out of the city water loan fund. So that's kind of how we came up with the repayment terms on that. So.
Any other questions on that one? Thanks for that explanation, Tom. That was helpful.
Yeah, thank you.
All right. Well, we'll plan on Spencer making the motion on that one. Let's go ahead and move into committal of funds. We've got the RM 086 Morgan Secondary Water Association. I've been chairing now for, I guess, 12 months. Last meeting, and I still, don't have committed to memory how we handle all these things. So this one we'll do a formal presentation on. Is that right?
Yes, I apologize, and Russell asked to be excused this morning. I said he could. It's because there's no changes in this one.
Okay.
It's just committal of funds on the loan for Morgan.
Okay.
So
Kyle, are you
Yep.
supportive of that? And okay, thank you.
he will be here for the
Russell.
board
Okay,
meeting.
great.
Sorry.
Okay, thank you. All right, and we've got a couple of special items. RE 470 Eden Waterworks, additional funds. Kyle, this is in your area. Anything you would like to add to set this up? As Tom comes up.
Not on this particular one. I'll just let Tom go ahead and explain it.
Thank you.
Yeah, Eden Waterworks, they have a project to install about 6,800 feet of culinary water pipeline. The project's under construction, but when the bids came in, they were significantly higher than what they were anticipated. And so they're just coming back to ask the board for some additional funds. So they'll be asking for an additional $425,000. The percentage and number of years will stay the same. So it will be 1% interest over 30 years, and the payments will increase from $65,900 to $82,400. Just so, and they will be here in person to answer any questions if the board has any.
Okay. Thank you. Any questions on that one? All right. So Kyle, you're supportive of that additional amount? Okay, thank you. All right, and then we've got the, in Kyle's area as well, the Liberty Pipeline Company. It looks like it's a reauthorization, and Ani's got that. Kyle, anything you'd like to set this up with?
Well, I'll just mention that you'll recall that when they came in, the last meeting, they had much more aggressive approach to, and more complex project, and they've scaled that back just because of costs and ability to repay and such, and so I think that's basically what this consists of.
Thank you. All right.
Yes, so the Liberty Pipeline Company came to the board in August, and the main purpose was for drought resiliency. They have 2 pressure zones, and the south zone has a more reliable water supply, and they want to pump water up to the north pressure zone because that's susceptible to drought. It's fed by a spring that in drought conditions like almost runs dry. So they wanted to build a booster pump station and a transmission line. And then they also included replacing their existing distribution line from a 6-inch pipeline to an 8-inch. And that's what they're coming to the board to, they want to change the scope and not do the distribution line. And so that's going to save about half the cost. It will reduce the cost of the pipe, bedding, backfill, and asphalt by almost half. By doing this, they can use the revolving construction fund because it'll be $1 million, up to $1 million that they're asking for, rather than the higher $3,600,000 that they were asking for. And that would have come out of the Conservation Development Fund. So they'll get a 0% interest for 20 years with $50,000 annual payments.
Any questions on that one? Okay, thank you, Ani. Kyle, it sounds like you're supportive of that one as well. Okay, excellent. And then the next special item is RM 103, Grantsville Irrigation Company. This is a reauthorization and committal of funds. It's in my area. I think, if I'm remembering, this one has scope changes in it. And so, Ani, can you just go over?
Yes. So the Grantsville Irrigation Company got the $2 million water conservation ARPA grant to repair, install, and replace the meters, as well as repair and replace their South Willow and North Willow diversion structures. They've been having issues with the Forest Service on the South Willow diversion structure. They won't be able to do as much work as they thought, and they would have to deal with fish flows downstream, and they don't think they will conserve, they'll probably be sending more water downstream than they suffer from leakage right now. So they'd like to use the money that was allocated for the South Willow Creek diversion to replace their inlet ditch on the North Willow Creek. It was poorly designed. They've had many issues through the years, and they feel like this would be a better use of the water conservation funds to reconstruct that. And they can go into the details of the engineering, but they feel like if the erosion continues, and it could cause major leakage in the reservoir, so it would be a better use of those ARPA funds to deal with that than to deal with the South Willow diversion at this time. And their engineer will be here, or their engineer will be online, and their president will be here in person.
Okay, thank you. Are there questions on this one?
And the other two parts of that project
Yeah.
remain the same, the North
Okay.
Willow diversion and the meter installation.
Okay, thank you. I am not super close to this one, and it's not my area of expertise, and so I'm just leaning on like your recommendation that this is an appropriate repurposing.
I believe so, for sure.
Thank you. Yeah, it feels like it. All right, thank you. Would someone be willing to make the motion for me, Dana? Okay, thank you. Appreciate that. All right. Let's see. I think on the agenda we've got a couple of more items. It looks like we should just ask Director Hassenyeager. I feel like we should talk about the Great Salt Lake public trust lawsuit now, or should we?
Yeah, Shalane, maybe you can come up. Marty had to step out actually for a meeting regarding that. So we'll have Shalane and Liz come up and just kind of give a brief background of what that's about. And then we'll have Marty present.
Perfect. Thank you.
Yeah, and we'll try to keep this brief, but the reason we do want to talk to you this morning is because we're hoping for some direction. We think you might want to take some action during the board meeting, and so we want to make sure that's the case. So we put the lawsuit in your packet. Don't know how many of you went through and read that lovely thing. Did you? Good. On your phone? Wow. But the reason we wanted to bring it to you, while Water Resources, the division, or the board were not named in the lawsuit, while we've been doing a little research, Liz and I have been discussing, I pulled up, and I've got approximate numbers. The board has an interest in about 150 projects that have not been paid off that could be affected if water rights in the Great Salt Lake Basin are curtailed. So that's 150 projects. And so we don't know exactly how many water rights. I haven't gone through and looked at every single one of them yet. There are some of those projects there might be multiple projects owned by a single sponsor, but still 150 projects that haven't been completely repaid. And if they don't have water to operate their project, they may not have funds to pay you back. So we thought you might have a concern about this. And so what Liz and Marty have been thinking is that you might like the AG's office to file a motion to intervene on your behalf. And you might also like to assign someone as a liaison between the AG's office and the board, someone who's responsible to review documents before they're submitted. So discuss. Liz, did you want to add anything?
No, if you read that lawsuit, it was quite long, but the quick summary is that several environmental groups are arguing that the state of Utah has breached its public trust doctrine in over appropriating the water. And so they have requested that the courts require the state to curtail all of those upstream water rights to the extent necessary to bring the lake back up to this, what they call the minimum level. And Ashley mentioned that clearly would have a big effect on some of these projects that are outstanding. The lawsuit, it's still in its very initial phase. It was originally named, the named defendants were the Department of Natural Resources, Division of Water Rights, and the Division of Forestry, Fire, and State Lands. Since then, the Division of State Parks has filed a motion to intervene. The Division of Wildlife has filed a motion to intervene. There have also been several private parties. Pacific Corp just filed to intervene. Central Utah Water Conservancy, Jordan River Water Conservancy. I might be getting these names wrong. Jordan Valley, thank you. I wrote them down so I wouldn't do exactly that. Provo City, Eagle Mountain, there have been several, and it would not surprise me if there are several more. This would be a pretty significant change to 150 years of existing water law if this were to, if the relief requested was to be granted. In speaking about this with the division, we thought it would be good for the division to intervene to protect those interests, and definitely the board as well, if you had an interest in that. Marty Bushman, he is representing the Department of Natural Resources, so it would be Wendy Crowther and myself that would represent the board and the division. That said, all of the state defendants are working very closely together on this litigation. And otherwise, so what we would be looking for is approval from the board to file a motion on your behalf to intervene and represent the board in that litigation. And then just because litigation has all sorts of deadlines, just a granting of authority to somebody, whether that's the division to approve filings on your behalf or someone from the board, a liaison, just someone that we can get in contact with quickly and not need to wait for these board hearings since they don't happen regularly.
Thank you. I appreciate that. I will go to questions. I'll take chair's prerogative to ask the first one. As I understand it, and I think you've laid out a good argument with all these other entities intervening. As I understand it, the purpose of our board intervening would be because of that interest in any repayment or really the collateral for that repayment. So it's about the financing and our funds. Is that correct?
Yes, that would be the primary purpose. The primary reason you have an interest is because of those approximately 150 projects that still owe you money.
Existing projects.
I mean, some of them are purchase agreements, so you do actually own the projects and the water rights. Others would be bonds, municipal projects that you don't own the project or the water rights, but you are still expecting repayment. And to keep your revolving, as we discussed, keep those revolving funds revolving.
Yeah. So for what it's worth, I'm very supportive of this because I mean, we're talking about taxpayer funds and the protection of those funds, and that's why I'm supportive of this. Are there questions? Go ahead, Kyle.
Well, I did take the time to read the lawsuit, and the very first question was, well, why is the division and the board even being considered in this? But your explanation helps to clear that up. But another question is, what would the economic impact be to the rest of the state if they were to prevail?
Huge. It is hard to contemplate
that's
exactly how big of a deal this would be if they were to prevail.
Thank you. Go ahead. Oh, go ahead, Mike. Yeah. Or Randy.
Mike and then Randy. That's
So,
right.
as I understand it, we do, in some of the 150 projects, we have ownership of the water rights or something to that effect. So at some point, if they were to prevail, we may be involved in the suit anyway, based on the water right issue, not the financial
Right.
issue.
And that's why we're saying you aren't a named defendant. You haven't been named in the lawsuit. We're saying we think you should be involved because this could affect you greatly.
Well, we're not named directly, but if water rights are involved and the water
And at
rights
some point,
division
ownership.
may have to,
Curtail
based
water
on that,
rights?
would have to
Yes.
go into the bucket, so to speak, to.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. Correct.
Great. Go ahead, Randy.
Well, as I thought a little bit about this, the implications to water rights, I mean, I think we would be extremely foolish not to be involved in this to protect because we're talking water rights and we're talking not just projects that are under contract today, but the future of the projects in the future would be, I mean, I don't see, water resources needs to be involved in it. That would be my bottom line. Whether we like it or not, we need to be there, period.
Well, and to add, part of the reason why that number of projects is so large, when we consider what might be affected by water rights restrictions for the Great Salt Lake, we have to consider the Bear River Basin, the Weber River Basin, the Provo. We have the Utah Lake, the Jordan River. We have to consider all of those. So it's a very large area that ultimately drains into the Great Salt Lake and affects the lake levels. So if that becomes a set standard, that the level must be met, so water rights cannot be used, they must be allowed to flow to the river, then that's why there's such a large number of projects.
Well, and it's not only, if you set a precedence in one place, it transfers to everywhere else.
Right.
Including the Colorado. I mean, California would love you to sit back and let this happen, you know. So, I mean, we need to be involved in it. Now, as to how the liaison works, I have no concerns about that, how you do that, but the board and water resources needs to be part of this.
So is, the way we have the agenda, can we do a motion today?
Yes. Okay. Yes, we wanted to discuss with you what you wanted. We did make it a public agenda item, so if you would like us to craft a motion or two,
Yes, yeah. Well,
directing the AG's office to file a motion to intervene, and do you have one of yourselves that would like to serve as liaison, or do you want the division to act on the board's behalf?
let's go to Blaine and then Charles, and then I think we'll see if we can get consensus around that
Sure.
second part of the question.
I think we have to be involved in this. And as far as a liaison, I think we can have the division be involved, and they should be, but I think one of the board members needs to be as well.
I agree. Thank you. All right.
Madam Chair and fellow board members, I am supportive of intervening in this process, opposing the lawsuit. And additionally, our canal company, our water district is being encouraged to participate as well. And our canal company hasn't made the commitment yet. But, and the reason for that is we've had really heavy legal expenditures this past year on our budget, and it's beat us up pretty heavily. And so we're anticipating, spending some money from that perspective as an intervener, but we feel like it's extremely important that we participate with those other entities as well as this entity too. So I support the process of intervention.
Yes, Bear River Canal Company is right up there at the top of our list of projects. So,
any other comments or questions? So I think it sounds like we're in consensus that we should intervene, that we should have a liaison, and I think that it makes sense for, I would suggest that that's the director or her designee on that liaison on the day-to-day and interacting with the AG's office. I do think that Blaine makes a good point that the actual kind of authority needs to stay with the board, and so therefore board members should also act as, I guess, so go like the actual liaison, or how do we insert that person from the board into that authority position? How would you suggest? And then we can just talk about who that would be.
Well, the day-to-day things that it would be really helpful so filings that if we have a response due, typically those are 14 days that it has to be drafted and responded. So it would be really great if the liaison could have the authority to approve those. As far as general litigation strategy and things, I think it would be very appropriate to have regular briefings on the litigation, so the board as a whole can understand what's going on and approve the greater directions. I would maybe just authorize the liaison to have the authority to approve filings and enter into agreements, and then if we have specific things that we need to do, if there was some sort of settlement or something, that could be withheld and kept with the board.
Okay. I wonder if, for the actual filings, I know that time is of the essence here. I do wonder if potentially, I know if the chair of the board potentially could act as a decision maker on those filings. If there's ever any sort of official filing, act in conjunction with the director, or could we do something where if the chair is unavailable, then the director could act on their behalf? I'm just a little bit, I'm speaking for myself. I don't know how the rest of the board feels, but I'm a little bit hesitant.
Well, and if
This is such a high, this is
Right.
such a high level.
And I would like to add a note, and I don't think she'd ever chime in on her behalf, but just a reminder to you all, the director of the division is actually also the executive secretary of the Board of Water Resources. So she is officially one of you. But I do feel like it's probably appropriate to have the chair, unless there is one other board member who is just so passionate about.
See how I'm offering up the chair as I'm finishing out my last month as chair? How do you?
Yeah, there will be elections later.
One other thing to consider is that litigation moves very, very slowly. And so 99% of the things that people are going to be looking at will be very boring and procedural and not have a lot of substance to them. The more substantive things, we definitely could have part of briefings before the board.
That's good. Yeah, that's a good point. How do you feel?
Madam Chair, I was just going to mention, as far as other litigation and so forth, I've been involved with other public boards, is we've had typically the director,
Okay.
the executive director, whoever, at that point there kind of be that role. However, any of the filings, correspondences, anything like that, that the whole rest of the board is apprised of every step, every document, so to speak. And then at that point there, especially where we're kind of scattered throughout the state, meaning talking a lot of a couple of us down south, is, I don't know about everyone else, but I would be perfectly fine of having Zoom meetings as frequent as needed. And so I've seen that in the past of other boards of, having strategy sessions, or, if there's a big decision needing to be made, that there's not necessarily, a vote because of public notice requirements, but that everyone is apprised of that. And so if there is maybe an impasse or an issue, that it would allow enough time to have an advertised special meeting to have a vote to direct the director or executive director, whoever, to, to proceed otherwise. And that way, the board's involved every step of the way just through noticing, and then if someone has a concern, they can reach out to that designated person. And what I'm proposing here is the director, but then, we can have strategy sessions as frequent as needed. And sometimes I've seen those meetings be 10 minutes long. Just to kind of get an update or a feeling of the board that, hey, we're going the right direction. So I don't know, that's my thought.
That potentially is a good kind of balance. So if I can restate how that would work practically, the director would be the liaison and would have authority over those filings. However, we would look to her to ensure that the board was, briefed every step of the way. We could actually meet to provide guidance.
When
Yeah.
you say director, chairman of the board or director of the division, which were you talking?
So what I've done before is it's been the executive director, the staff level, but that the board is getting, so basically any information that, in this situation, what I'm proposing, whatever information candidates would be getting from either, is Wendy part of the AG office? Because I knew Wendy like in the private side, but is she part?
Yes, so it would be Wendy and I on this case that would
Okay.
represent the board.
So whatever information that they're providing, the AG's office is providing Candace in this situation, it would also be coming to the board. Now, obviously, there would be a declaration on everything that, hey, this is confidential or privileged or, whatever. There might be stuff that's sent out through, I've even seen it where it's password protected as it's come through, on the attachments, those kind of things because of the sensitivity of it. But then that way, the board has the ability to be totally apprised of what's going on. And if anyone sees any objections, then can reach out to Candace or can say, hey, we need to have a special meeting, we advertise accordingly, or it can even just be a strategy session with no consensus that is intended. That's what I've seen it before, not saying that that's what we have to do here, but just, I can't even think of how many litigation cases I'm involved in right now with other boards.
It's helpful to understand, yeah.
And for me, it would just be, and maybe some of you have more time on your hands than I do, but just, where this is what she does full time, and works already very closely, intimately with AG's office. Anyways, that's my thoughts.
I think, for what it's worth, I think what you're suggesting inserts that accountability that and it's not about you holding accountable, it's about the board being accountable to its authority, and what we need to do. It does insert that accountability because we have full transparency into everything that's happening. And at any point, again, we see all of the documents. At any point, we can have these meetings, and we could, also even, move to direct our liaison to do something differently. So go ahead, Randy, and then Blaine.
My suggestion would be that we have the director, Candace, of course, at this point in time, and the chair and the vice chair, basically as an executive committee to review things and decide what needs to go to the board and what doesn't need to go to the board, and allow the flexibility for that group to make. Unless it's a major thing, I think those three could make that decision for the board. I would
And that
personally prefer.
inserts accountability as well, like some accountability on the board side. That's another option, yeah.
No, but we have a chair and a vice chair and our director, unless it's something that needs to go to the whole board. I'll be honest, I don't get things looked at. Maybe the rest of you do, but I don't. I'll be honest. But I think the responsibility should lie with our chair and vice chair and our executive director to, and so I would suggest that we would craft a motion that would give the authority to those, call it an executive committee or whatever you'd like to call it, to make the decisions of what needs to go to the full board and what doesn't.
Okay. That's good. Thank you, Randy.
I agree 100%
Okay.
with Randy.
All right. Thank you, Dana. Blaine?
Just an observation, if it's like other motions to intervene that I've been involved in, it's not a guarantee we're going to be allowed to intervene. It's a motion to request that we get it. Am I correct on that?
You are correct. Thus far, the plaintiffs have not opposed any of the motions to intervene. It is a pretty low standard. You just need to show that you have an interest that would be affected that isn't being adequately represented by someone else. And clearly no one else has a revolving fund that is relying on repayment of all of these projects. So I think it very likely we will be allowed in.
I would be shocked if a judge would not let us intervene or be part of this. I mean, if you request, you're going to be part of it.
Oh, and one other item you might be interested in. It was in front of Judge Stormont, I believe, and the Division of Water Rights and DNR requested a water judge be appointed to handle all of this, and that was just granted this last week, and it was assigned to Judge Scott, I believe. So I think that's a positive step.
May I suggest that potentially kind of where we might land that incorporates all of the good thinking of everyone would be this executive committee that, as long as it's expedient, that Randy is suggesting, but layered on top of that, any decision for action from that executive committee, whether it be to move forward with the filing or to not move forward with the filing, that information is shared with the board. So again, that inserts that additional layer of transparency, but that we're not, again, relying for a full board or full board input on those administrative. Does that feel okay?
Yeah, I feel good with that.
Okay, yeah, okay. So Randy, does that feel like, would you be open to making that motion? And we would ask the staff to write to capture all the sentiment of the conversation. And
If you can craft something that folds it all into it, I would be happy to do it.
thank you. And again, so there's those couple of pieces to actually intervene, and then what the liaison and the decision making in certain places looks like. Good.
Can I clarify, was the intent, so you'll have the chair and the vice chair and the director as this executive committee. If the chair and vice chair are unavailable and it's time sensitive, is the director going to have the authority to just do basic filings and things?
Absolutely.
So, yeah, yeah.
I mean, it's not going to usually be such an emergency that we wouldn't be able to apprise everyone and get permission, but just in case.
I do, right? Exactly.
And one other item, we are subject to the Open and Public Meetings Act, but one of the exceptions under that act is you can go into closed session to discuss litigation. And so for strategy meetings and things like that, that would be an option.
That's good. That's actually good to know. All right. Excellent. Well, thank you. Well, moving right along to get us to our board meeting, I guess we'll move on to information to the board. Does that feel good?
Well, I'll just say real quick, the next item on the actual board meeting agenda is a water marketing strategies update.
yes.
Emily Lewis will be here, provide a quick update just to tell you we're almost done.
Perfect. That'd be great. All right. So do we do? Oh, yeah, let's do that. Let's go there first. So, and then we'll go to information to the board. So as I mentioned, I'm wrapping up my last month as chair. I haven't really checked in with the staff on this or checked in with anyone else on this, but my understanding is kind of tradition is that the vice chair would assume the chair role, and then we would just move into the kind of person who's next on the list.
Well, tradition.
Yes, I know. Okay, so that's what we'll get staff started.
Tradition is an interesting term because it used to be traditional that chairs would serve at least 2 terms.
Oh, okay.
And then some decided they only wanted 1. So, yeah, it's.
Whoa.
So, yeah, when you say tradition, yeah, it varies. I don't know that we have tradition. There's no limit that says you can only be chair for 1 term. And Charles, as vice chair, has actually served as chair before. So, yes, you can all talk amongst yourselves and decide what you want to do. I do need to point out, I don't know if this was said before the meeting, and I know we're kind of trying to rush through some things here now. We do need at least a 10-minute break between meetings for the AV team to switch from one to the other. So just so you're all aware, if we run long, we're going to have a 10-minute break.
That is important. Thank you. Thank you for that point. I think so. I have not thought about this, and I was kind of looking forward to maybe setting back a little bit. However, I will say I do feel like I'm finally just getting my legs on chairing. So I would be open to continuing, but I also want to make sure I would be so supportive of someone else taking on the role as well.
My only suggestion is I think there needs to be some new blood in the chairmanship, and the vice chair ought to at least be replaced.
Wait a minute.
I was going to bring up that there's nothing in statute that outlines the terms of office for the chairman, other than that there is an annual election of the chair. And so, my thought process going into it initially was that I like the idea of a 2-year stint instead of a 1-year stint, because as you just alluded to, Juliette, you get to the end of that first year when you just start to feel comfortable with, what you're doing. And I agree with, even though I like Charles and he's been here for a long time, it's also appropriate, I think, that there, as he has suggested, that there be new blood, brought into the process as well. And I hope that didn't offend you, so.
No, I appreciate it.
I might chime in. I mean, I've been asked in the past to be part of, chair, vice chair, but with what I do, I'm not very accessible a lot of the time. I got one more year doing what I've committed to do. After that, I wouldn't mind being involved, but access to me is pretty limited because of the remoteness and how I do stuff. So if anybody's thinking they'd like me to be there, I probably would not like to at least one more year. And I'll probably be kicked off the board by then, which will be just fine too. But I'd be happy to serve after that. But I'm just not available.
If I might add mine, I had the distinction of being the last one for 2 years. It was during the COVID era and all of that, and that was really unique. But I've been chair twice. Kyle has, Charles has. I'm very supportive of Juliette taking another term. Having been chair for 2 terms in a row, it was beneficial to know what was going on. But I really think one of these 3 new ones, with Randy's position being what he is, I think one of the, either Spencer or Dana or Mike, I would think it'd be good to, as a vice chair, get their feet wet and get involved in that sense. That's my input.
My input, I think there's quite a bit of learning curve, so I would be very much in supportive of supporting a 2-year for yourself. And I'm probably like Randy right now. I'd be more than glad to help in the future, unless for some reason everyone else says the same thing I say. then I might reconsider. But I think in another year or two, something like that, I'd be able to help with that. So.
I'm very open to being to an election for another year of chair. So I'll leave that out there. Dana, Mike, how are you feeling? I mean, Brian Steed isn't here today too, so that's always an option. Well, I'm just saying he's not here. Yeah, but how are you all feeling about potentially?
Given the discussion we just had about the litigation and this committee, I would be happy to help. However, my accessibility would be virtual for much of that. I am accessible, but I can't drive to Salt Lake every week to go to a meeting. So, but I would be more than happy to serve.
All right.
So do you want to speak, Mike?
Yeah, what do you think?
I'd suggest we throw Mike in the hot seat.
I'm happy to do it. I feel like I'm the new guy on the block, and I don't want to step ahead of anybody here, but I'm happy to serve.
Yeah.
More than happy to serve, and I am accessible.
And he is local.
Okay. I think that I think we could definitely handle Zoom meetings just fine.
Just clarify, they're Google Meets, because
Oh,
that's what we
goodness.
use with the state.
But
but
Google Meets doesn't have
sure.
the beauty filter on it like Zoom does. I prefer Zoom. Just saying.
I don't know, there were some fun little Halloween backgrounds. I don't.
Well, why don't we? I think maybe just we can kind of discuss amongst ourselves during the very short break and see if we can just have a motion ready to go. So it sounds like Dana and Mike, you're both willing, and I think it's just a timing issue, and so maybe we'll flip a coin, and whoever makes the election.
Honestly, like in the interest of time, I am willing to rescind my availability, and we should make a motion to
generous.
retain Juliette and have
so very
Mike be
generous.
the vice chair.
Okay. Sounds like we're gonna go with that. Okay. Okay, excellent. All right. Well, we'll just plan on that motion during.
Is that two separate motions?
I think so.
Okay.
Sure.
All right. Oh, that's right. That's right. Okay, thank you. Candace, I'll just turn it over to you to kind of manage what we need to know for this last little bit on information to the board. I assume it's the funds report and. Okay. Yes, and you can have that microphone.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Status of funds, Shalane?
Yes, I'll be quick since we had such a robust discussion before. You will notice that I did finally get the dam safety separated out from the regular revolving funds. So now your revolving construction fund looks really small, which is okay. We do have a couple projects being presented today that will take a couple million from there, but there's still funds available there. The city's water loan fund will have a huge change today if the Hurricane City project is authorized. I will also note that we were able to go back. There was one project sitting there authorized for the longest time, and Marisa finally did some research and said, I found a withdrawal. It was withdrawn. We just never got it off. So the Millville City project that was on there taking up $1.5 million or whatever it was has now been removed because you actually had officially withdrawn it. We just missed it somewhere along the way. And then to the C&D fund. And I did want to go ahead and just let you know. So when I looked at the numbers for this, when I started the first of the fiscal year, had to prepare this, I'll just let you know. The funds carried over from the prior year for the C&D fund were about $169 million. And then the way I figure out what's available for the year, I have to add in estimated interest. We figured it'll be about $6 million, going along with past history, about $6 million in interest coming in. Over $19 million in repayments over the course of the year. So on prior projects funded from the C&D fund, just over 19 million, and about 43 million of sales tax. Then we have to do a bunch of deductions, because whether you realize it or not, that 3.8 annual dam safety appropriation isn't new money from the legislature. It's them telling us to take money from our C&D fund and pay for dam safety with it. So we have to subtract that out. We have to separate out our operating budget, and then I have to subtract all the funds that have been contracted but not spent yet, which actually total about $118 million at the time. So this was back July 1. And that's how ultimately I got to having about $110 million available for the fiscal year. That's not what was there at the start of the fiscal year. That's just what we assume. This is what's coming in over the course of the year, so we have this available to contract, commit, and authorize. So as you can see, we've contracted just over, yeah, my eyes are blurry, but just over 19 million so far this year in the C&D fund. We've got another 20 million committed. That includes a couple of the projects today, the Eden's additional funds, the Morgan secondary loan. And then you can see our projects authorized. You can see that several of those have been there for a few years. In fact, more than a few. So it's probably time to look at those. There's Woodruff still on there for 3.2 million. I don't know that that project's going to happen, so we could probably have a few more withdrawals. That is something I wanted to mention today too, that while with what's authorized and what's proposed today, it looks like it's bringing our C&D fund down to a balance of about $4 million left. There are some of these projects that you'll see were authorized maybe in 2015, 2016, 2017, that it's time we looked at those to decide if they're really going to use those funds, and if not, get them off the books so that we know we have a few more million available. So nothing much has changed in the other funds. All your ARPA grants have been committed at this point, and the conservation grants as well have all been committed. So there hasn't been any change there other than we keep contracting. So the numbers at the bottom of the page don't change, but what's actually contracted does. So are there any questions? Covered that well enough before? Awesome. Thank you.
Great, thanks, Shalane. Joel, we wanted to real quickly give you a legislative preview. As you all know, the legislative session will start mid-January, and there's always things that happen. So we thought we might give you a quick briefing on that. And Joel's gonna take care of that for me.
Madam Chair and members of the board, so what I've just handed out, the first 3 pages is a summary of draft legislation that we are aware of and know some about. In some cases, we've seen drafts, and so there's a little bit of language there. In some cases, it's just more of a title and maybe a sponsor, and we're hoping for more information to come. The bill that I've included is the one that would most directly affect the board. There would be significant changes. This bill is sponsored by Representative Casey Snyder and would change the way water projects are funded for all state agencies, kind of putting it through a prioritization process where drinking water, water quality, community impact board, board of water resources, all these projects get submitted and kind of scheduled on a 10-year, well, I think it's every 4 years they have to submit a report of when all the projects would be funded. So there'd be some dramatic changes. That some of them make me uneasy. Some of it is maybe that change is always a little scary. I have to admit that sometimes I have to be patient and think, okay, what good could come from this? But I wanted you all to be aware of it as that draft is now out, that you can look through that. It is 45 pages, so it's going to take a little bit of time to get through it. But the section that is most impactful, I think, is the prioritization of projects, and it's more towards the end of the bill. There's also effects in that bill for the way we do state water planning and providing some additional guidance and language to help us in our water planning. I also saw a bill title from Representative Albrecht that was modifications to the state water planning process. And so there's titles out there, there's different bills. We're tracking them, and we'll be providing you updates as the session goes along. I've already shared with you the legislative tracker, that kind of the spreadsheet that we had used last year. It's been updated, and so it's shared with you as well. And as that gets a little further along, I'll send that link out. Right now, it's all just unnumbered bills, but once we get some numbers, we'll get that shared with you all so you can be tracking that. Any questions? Yes.
And maybe you don't know, but with this bill, and I haven't read it, but Snyder's, is there something we haven't been doing correctly on prioritization, or that is viewed as not being done that way?
Madam Chair, if I might answer, when we asked him that very question, he said, no, we love the way you're doing it at Water Resources. The board's great. He wanted more kind of a unification. He said it's similar to the way UDOT does projects, where where they come to the legislature, say, hey, these are all the road projects needed. This is how we recommend they be prioritized, and then they can kind of schedule it out. I tried to explain that water is different than roads, and a lot of it's buried, and you don't necessarily know exactly what kind of shape it's in. Roads are pretty easy to inspect and plan for. Water's not always that way. But I think that's kind of where he's coming from. Candace, I don't know if you have anything to add.
Yeah, I think you covered that spot on. It's this kind of overarching vision of addressing kind of the water infrastructure needs for the state is what I hear from Representative Snyder. Similar to the transportation, creating some unified water infrastructure plan every 4 years that has a prioritization process involved in it. He spoke a lot about seeing all water as wet. And the realization that while the Board of Water Resources has historically been able to fund all the projects that you guys have that come before you and that you guys feel good with, there are other boards who have less funding available, and so they're turning away projects. So trying to address that overarching kind of need. I would also mention another piece of this bill. This is a very So as you read this, look for the underlines and go to the end. That's the end. Start with the end, because that's where the big changes in that prioritization process. Another thing that comes in line is the request for the board to do a study regarding some sort of user fee to cover water infrastructure. His idea is that there would be some sort of 1 or maybe 2 years appropriation, one-time appropriation provided to this kind of new water infrastructure fund that's proposed in this bill. And then after that, there would be some user fee associated with it that the board would get the opportunity to do a study and then implement. So we will all be very popular if this passes.
And we'll have lots more staff to help with that.
We have asked, we did put in a fiscal note for this because it will take a significant effort for sure.
Thank you, Director. You mentioned a fiscal note associated with additional staff. You mentioned the study around the user fee. I see that this is, kind of a similar approach to transportation. Transportation currently has significant earmarks on the state sales tax. We do have some earmarks or an earmark on the state sales tax, relatively small. Transportation has significant earmarks on the sales tax. In addition to the gas tax, are there any additional earmarks or actual funding for water projects in this bill?
Madam Chair, no. I mean, other than the idea that, and it's not in this bill, but there would be some sort of one-time appropriation or maybe 1 year or 2 year appropriations that would be provided to this new fund. But then really envisioning this like user fee would cover infrastructure. Historically, just to note, state revolving funds have typically made up roughly 20% of the water infrastructure costs for the state. That's not to say that the need won't increase into the future as the federal government is doing less and less, but just kind of put a thought in that we have not historically covered, more than 20%. Thank you.
Madam Chair, in a nutshell, is this going to combine the drinking water and the Department of Ag water projects and our projects, those 4 entities that provide funding for water projects? Are they all going to go into one instead of being in 4?
Madam Chair, if I may. So currently, they are still envisioned to be 4 separate boards, that they won't all be the same. This bill envisions that the Water Development Coordinating Council, which has representation from the directors of each of the relevant boards participating in it, would be what the application and prioritization process, sorry, not application, the prioritization process went through. Joel, did I miss anything else? Sorry.
And just one of the concerns that we felt was the board does so many agricultural projects, and one of the fears we have is that those end up getting lost in a prioritization when they're competing with municipalities, and so we have some concerns.
Yeah, we're getting on time. Thank you. Appreciate that very much, Joel.
So there will be lots more to discuss.
All right. Great. Is there anything else that you need to mention in this meeting? We can also, of course.
Marisa, did you want to discuss the application? We are kind of running out of time. You have Wallace Peak, what company?
Tom too.
Okay, maybe just a couple very quick, if we can.
Okay, Madam Chair, members of the board received an application from Wallace's Peak Water Company. It's for a proposed new dam and some pipeline. I just want to get your feelings a little bit on how we should proceed. I'm not an official motion today, just some ideas maybe. This company is a legitimate incorporation. It is a partnership made up of 3 individuals, a father and 2 sons. They provide water for 1 farm of 2 central pivots, 220 acres or so. They want to build a dam to store 100 or 1,000 acre feet of water. The project cost that they submitted in the application is $10.1 million. The cost estimate from their engineer was $10.9 million, and that didn't include all of the things. So I have a feeling we're looking at maybe a $12 million plus project. The question we have as staff is, the board guidelines state that the board will not fund projects sponsored by individuals or families. This is a legitimate corporation, but it is 1 family, a father, 2 grown sons. Shalane earlier talked about making sure they're rock solid in being able for repayment on projects. I definitely would not recommend that this is that type of situation. They'll be asking for $5 million, maybe up to $10 million in loan money. The actual geology of the area is kind of questionable whether a dam can be built, and I'm a dam guy. I would love to see a dam built, but this may not be the place and the situation for that. So we were just wondering what your feeling is on the corporation versus the individual family situation.
I think that I'm watching time, and then I'm also just want to be really conscientious that the board's not doing anything that's like feels like it's actual business that requires a motion and should be noticed. So we want to be just really careful about that. Chair's prerogative, I'll go ahead and just kind of maybe provide some guidance, and then I'll allow my colleagues to share if they disagree. I think that we should lean on the advice of the Attorney General on whether or not the setup, is consistent or not with the letter of the law of the board guidelines, which are guidelines, but also kind of the general intent of their interpretation. I think that we could look to the AG for some guidance there. On moving forward, I mean, it kind of feels like if an application's made, we have to at least hear it and we can take action on it further. So I don't have a lot of heartburn about doing the investigation.
Okay, I just wanted to clarify too that part of this is because if Tom goes through the full feasibility process, there will have to be an economic and financial feasibility done. And he's just concerned if that process, because just so you're aware, we don't have an economist on staff. We have one on the board, but we don't have one on staff anymore. So we actually contract that work out. So we have to pay Zions Bank to do something that then when we get the results, we have to interpret and decide. So it's a little bit longer process, and Tom's just wondering if this is something that just rubs the board wrong anyway, and ultimately the recommendation is going to be to not fund the project. Is it worth going through the investigation process? If you think it is, and you want a full feasibility, we'll do it. We just want to make sure we're sticking with what the board intends.
We do have the meeting in January. Is there anything that, you know, could we? I just feel like I don't have enough true information. It's just kind of hitting me cold. I'm not sure how you all feel.
And that's why we're discussing it here, not in a board meeting. We just wanted to hear from you. Do you want us to pursue this? Do you want us to do a full-on feasibility? Because Tom's capable. He'll do it if if you want.
Could we give you some direction at a January briefing meeting? I think, do we have, or does the timing?
Is there timing?
Wanting to have it presented in January.
Oh, they wanted it presented for feasibility in January, so.
I have asked them for additional information, and they have not provided it yet, and reports are coming up due in a few weeks for the January meeting, so.
Yeah, I mean, given that that additional information wasn't provided timely in order to have this conversation, I would suggest that we just stay this to the briefing I would suggest we stay this to the briefing meeting in January and go from there. Does that feel?
And then we could also get our AG's advice on it as well, so as you requested. So just a little bit more time.
That would be my recommendation, that we just pass, move it down and have further discussion in the January meeting. I know my name has been mentioned as being supportive of the project in another life, but that's not necessarily the case. So I just wanted to set the record on that I'm familiar with the family and have been involved with them years ago, but I think we need further discussion.
So let's go ahead and stay that until then. And given where we are in time and knowing that we need the time for a changeover, which I didn't realize, and we would need time for a little break anyway, I'd be looking for a motion to adjourn, and I would just note that we'll go ahead and we'll start our meeting at 10:10, which will give us that 10 minutes for a changeover, assuming that there is a motion to adjourn.
Madam Chair,
Yes.
I move that we adjourn.
All right. I don't know if that needs a second. All in favor? All right. Thank you.